sorry, but
public franchising and have public franchising.
we don't want you to contain your enthusiasm on Friday afternoon.
No one
It's
wants to
gonna be a
talk
lot of fun.
about
Great panel. Not long ago, I finished reading a book for the second time. Whenever I have a good history book, I feel like I've got to read at least 2 or 3 times in order to extract the wisdom of it. And it's Bernard Bayless's book called The Barbarous Years. And it's about the peopling of British North America in the 17th century. And one of the striking takeaways was he made a statement early on in the book that kind of carries throughout the theme about the differentiation between the British in North America and the British in England. And that was, our mythology will tell you that we wanted that the New England colonies were founded by folks who wanted religious freedom. Well, that's kind of mythology, because the truth of the matter is they were religious fanatics, and they all wanted their own space. But what happened was, they all got there 1620, 1621, 1623. Now, the Virginia example is very different in its formation, but these were very, very rough years. Not only did they have to eke out an existence in a very harsh land, they inherited a plague of their own creation and wiped out a lot of the Native American population. But what you had were different religious groups from different parts of England. And if you were to go back to the kingdom of James I at that time, you would have had very few people who said, yes, I'm an Englishman. You found people say, oh, I'm a Corkshire, I'm from Cork, or I'm from Yorkshire, or I'm from Sussex, or I'm from Hampshire, but I'm certainly not an Englishman. And so all of these colonies come, and they're very underpopulated, and they're desperate, and they are not religiously unified at all. In fact, in many ways, they're mutually antagonistic. And there was no real support in the early 17th century for this. So what did they do? They ended up cooperating in order to maximize their food production. And all of a sudden, within half a generation, people from Yorkshire were speaking to people from Sussex, were speaking to people from other parts. So within the first generation of the settlement in New England, and Ursula's heard this story before, so you don't have to pay attention, but they learned the art, the necessity of collaboration. And that's really what is one of the themes here today, is the American propensity for collaboration. Now, happily, we don't have to collaborate anymore to feed ourselves, but we do have to collaborate to make the American value proposition meaningful in a highly challenging world, where we're facing geopolitical challenges that don't need collaboration, that have authority behind them. So we have seen this American genius for collaboration assert itself and sometimes retreat. And I think we could say even in recent years, we've seen our propensity for collaboration to retreat. I would submit to you that we have to reinvent that art that has gone back to the year 1620. And the interesting thing is that within the first generation, those Englishmen and women that lived in those colonies that had collaborated were all, and what he makes the point in his book, they were already fundamentally different from their cousins and brothers who were left behind in England, because they had reached a new level of abstraction about how to organize themselves. And that's what collaboration does. It opens up possibilities. In some cases, it feeds you. In today's world, we'll find out what we can do with collaboration. But that's the heart of what we're talking about. With these three gentlemen, they're coming at different avenues at how American business, American government, American organizations collaborate. Why? Because we have to. Because another things that we invented were scaling of organizations. We make huge organizations. It's one of the things we do. In fact, we think that's normal. But we make organizations so large that the weight of themselves can collapse on themselves, and they don't fulfill the function for which they were created. So what is the antidote to the ills of scaling? Again, collaboration. And so this is a theme that I think you're going to see just naturally in the presentation that these gentlemen are going to make. And without any further ado or irrelevant historical segues. I'd like to introduce you wonderful public servants, public-private servants, but each of them has served in the U.S. government, and one of them still is. So if I might introduce first and foremost, on my right, my immediate left is Carmine D'Aloisio. He's the president of Daloisio LLC. He's a member of the Board of Advisors of the National Association of District Export Councils and former senior commercial officer for the U.S. Commercial Service. And to Carmine's left is one of my favorite people, Dale Tasharski, Deputy Director General for Global Markets and International Trade Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce, former acting head of U.S. Commercial Service in the last administration. I used to love to call him the kid with his finger in the dike, because that's what he was doing for several years. And he has survived that ordeal and is now refreshed and ready, fresh from a State Department meeting with new visions going forward. And to Dale's left is an old friend as well, Mr. Trevor Gunn. His day job is Vice President of International Relations for Medtronic, America's largest health technology provider. One of his major passions and his intellectual offspring is the USA Healthcare Alliance, or as he likes to call it, USAHA. I'll get it right eventually, Trevor. But I originally met Trevor when he headed up another creation of the U.S. government called Business back in the 90s, which was the extraordinarily foresightful organization out of the Department of Commerce, Commercial Service at the time, which created American business centers around Russia. And it was part of the government's manifestation, which was enormously helpful to us in that period of the 1990s in Russia, which I spent most of my time there. And so we've gone different paths. But all of these gentlemen have been practitioners of the public-private partnership, which, if you think about it, is the core of what we're doing at the District Export Council. We have executive secretaries from the Commercial Service, and we are called to serve, and we are appointed at the pleasure of the Secretary of Commerce. And there is a robust and happy interaction between these groups. We're always seeking better ways to do it. And here with some future-oriented opportunities are these three gentlemen. And what I would like to do, if you don't mind, is start off with Dale. Dale, because you were the kid with the finger in the dike for a while, but you've emerged now. We've got people in place. We've got a new head of the Commercial Service and new money, we think, soon. And a vision that accompanies this. And then we'll move on from there. Just brief statements, because we want to throw out some questions and really open this up to questions you all might have, because this pertains to our daily business.
Great, thank you, Scott. It's great to be here and to see everybody. I want to first say what a great pleasure it is to be here with Carmine D'Aloisio, old colleague and friend, and Trevor, of course. We're looking forward to today's discussion. We had a pre-meeting and talked about all the great things we could talk about and discuss with you. We want to, I think, from my perspective, as much as we can keep this interactive, I think it's going to be very, 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 very helpful. I want to give a shout out. We've got several colleagues from U.S. Commercial Service from across the United States here. I think, and some of them are about to head on the trains and planes and things, so they may be sneaking out. But I don't know, is Joe Hanley still here? He's out in the hall? He's on his way, okay. And we've got at least 4 or 5 colleagues. Would you stand for me, please? Our colleagues, there we go. Oh, it's more 4 or 5. These are my opening moment. I just want to thank you, my colleagues, for the great work that you do, and then thank you as DEC members for working with us on behalf of U.S. business across America and bringing our economic competitiveness back after some tough times over the last couple of years with COVID. So it's great to be here. Looking forward to this discussion. We've got a lot to talk about. I feel very positive about the direction the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service is going as we sit here today, and we can talk a little bit about that as we move forward.
Great, thanks. Great, thank you. Now I'd like Carmine to have a few words. Carmine not only serves on the Board of Advisors, he's a thought leader for National DEC. And it was just this time last year, or maybe early in the summer, when you put the final touches on some recommendations for how we can work together as American business and the commercial service and more. And I think for those members of the commercial service who are here, they will not find his message unwelcome.
Well, thank you, Scott, and it's great to be with this panel. I've had an opportunity to work extensively with both of these gentlemen. I was 35 years in the U.S. Department of Commerce, and like Dale, I had the opportunity to serve at what was at the time called the district office, right, as an export, what's it called today? Okay, use the act, right. And I haven't been gone that long, but it seems like a long time. It's been 6 years, so it's been delightful to transition to the private sector as an independent consultant. It's quite an eye-opener, and it's quite an experience in rejection. So I'm enjoying this process of learning very, very much. But yes, I and about half a dozen other ex-officers were brought into the advisory board over the last couple of years, and we're grateful that we can continue to give our experience. So this session is a lot about not so much technical assistance, but where can the U.S. government's efforts go in the whole area of trade promotion broadly. And our recommendations to the board were in two forms, very quickly, and then we can continue later. One was a major, what we call framework paper, an intellectual piece that said a lot has changed since 1980, when you did have a paradigm shift, when the commercial service was created. And that was taken out of the State Department. That was a really big deal, the Foreign Service Act of 1980. But here we are in 2022. We remember the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative started in 2013. The world has significantly changed. So what are we doing? There's a lot of new emphasis on rebuilding America, rebuilding American infrastructure, jobs, the middle class, etc. Well, our argument was, and NADEC has adopted, has taken that on, is there's a role for the Commerce Department, and more specifically within the International Trade Administration, the commercial service / global markets, to play a significant role in the capacity of the United States to achieve exports for the companies that will grow out of this new infrastructure investment, let's say, and secondly, to rebuild American competitiveness overseas. But at the same time as you're keeping your eye on the long game, you have to, we believe that NADEC can inform and educate Congress on an annual year basis of the funding needs. Because there's been a lot of decline in, as I would say, I can say that, in the commercial service. And we really need to rebuild the numbers and resources. So this is the two-pronged approach. Long game, strategic, what can we do? And then on an annual basis, you've got to go to the appropriators and always ask for more money than you actually think you're going to get. And stop there.
Thank you very much, Carmine. I think that you laid the groundwork for some fruitful conversation. Trevor Gunn, you are a source of endless fascinating stories, and I'm sure you could do many of them with Medtronic. But I would like for you to focus on the themes and the vision and the animating spirit of US AHA, because it truly is cutting new ground, and it is a driver of US exports, and it is an open hand extended to the small, medium enterprise community from a large corporation.
Exactly. Thanks, Scott. It's great to be with Dale, Carmine, and yourself, Scott. I mean, my day job is at a small company called Medtronic. 34 billion in revenue, 100,000 employees, largest medical technology company. And if we had all that we needed in Medtronic, I would not have founded US AHA. What we found is that we needed to have an interconnected ecosystem of people that we normally didn't meet. Architects, engineers, IT companies, people that train nurses, people that are on the front line of healthcare. That's what we found. We do a lot of medical technology, 131,000 medical technologies at present. That's a lot. But the issue is that we're entering in as a company, and small, medium-sized companies are probably, fundamentally, small, medium-sized business industry. Let me make sure that everybody understands that. The Medtronics of the world are an exception, not the rule. 85% are small, medium-sized, mom-and-pop medical technology companies. We're finding the same thing, nonetheless, which is that we're entering into deals way too late, not getting intelligence, and by the time we arrive, we say, hey, we're Medtronic, we're the biggest and best, and of course you should, and that's wrong in so many ways. We need to be involved with people that are involved with those projects and have a more holistic approach with our government. And I always found that when I founded this PPP with the government. Our first partners with the Commercial Service and the U.S. Department of Commerce, of course, but we today have partnerships with DFC, XM, and USTDA and all. What it is, at the end of the day, it comes down to demand, doesn't it? Around the world, every single country wants what we have in the United States in terms of healthcare. They do not want our American healthcare system. Let's be very direct about that. You can even call it a system. But you have subsystems. So we're not trying to bring the American healthcare system. Frankly, 18% of GDP, outcomes that sometimes, unfortunately, approach that of an emerging country. Let's be honest with ourselves. They don't want that. They want everything else. They want the Mayo. They want medical technology. They want the big IT companies and small IT companies. They want the world-class nursing and medical training and education programs that most of our university medical systems that are generally nonprofit, by the way. Let's put in that, Scott, you said SMEs. Remember that you can be a constituent of USAHA, even if you're a nonprofit organization, because you also contribute to that American healthcare competitiveness point. So that's what we did, Scott. That's why we did it. We're still young, like really young. But we're 120 constituents, so I think we're doing okay. But I think at the end of the day, people have to realize that there is massive amounts of demand for everything America has in the healthcare area. And that there's massive amounts of construction, big healthcare projects going on all around the world. And America is losing because it's disorganized. I think about China, right? Sitting at the quay, waiting for the boat to come in. You're the client. You look, I don't need to tell you that China pulls up with the ocean liner. That's the ocean liner that docks at the quay, right? It's got everything up there. It's got the berths, you got the small, you got the window berths, and everything you possibly could imagine. But then they look for America. You literally have to look over the quay down there, you see a bunch of rowboats down there. They're all rowing out by themselves. And they're often, even if they're rowing together as a private sector, we're not rowing with our government. That's what I'm talking about. We're beginning to change, to try to change that. We're not going to be we're not going to be everything to everybody. That's not the point. But if we can be better organized and more strategic together in lockstep with our government, with no political agenda other than bringing the excellence of American healthcare to foreign shores and just make it easier on them to make the choice for America, we've probably done our jobs, Scott, or at least we're paying attention.
That's great. That's great. Well, one of the things, and I highly recommend you take a look at that website. It really, if you look at what they're about, it is really to bring together an alliance, a collaboration of manufacturers in the industry, and to come up with something better than the constituent parts. And I think it's safe to say that they are succeeding. Trevor would say they're never succeeding enough, but that's the path forward. And in a way, this is really what we're looking at today and talking about the path forward with the Commercial Service 2022 and beyond. But I wanted to talk about something else with regard to the lesson that you find in AUSAID. One of the things that jumps out to me is the phrase, and they say it a couple times, integrated solutions. Why did that hit me? I'm amongst other things, a refugee of Cisco Systems, and it was when I was with Cisco Systems, I was vice president for emerging markets and in charge of 130 countries, and we were to evangelize the use of the internet. And that's all great, and there was a time when Cisco thought, oh, well, all you need is Cisco, end-to-end solution. One of the things that we'll talk about this in coverage models, and you and I touched on this briefly, Trevor, is that big corporations don't cover very well. They cover where their numbers come from, but that's another story. But where do we take the competitive advantage? We hear about the unstoppable Chinese all the time. Where we stop them is when we can project the power of our integrated solutions internationally. Much easier said than done. But in my business, in internet connectivity, in this market, in the US market, there's an enormous strength in what is called systems integrators. People who take, and this is where, again, our mandate of small, medium enterprises, this is where they feed. And because our fantastic market is the most competitive market in the world. How do you transmit that competitiveness into an Africa or into a Southeast Asia or into Eastern Europe and so forth? And so that's part of the question, is how do we harness and harmonize these different integrated powers? Because these integrated powers are extraordinary. We beat the Chinese every time when we offer an integrated solution, because I can assure you, Huawei has an end-to-end Huawei solution with Chinese government financing and all of the other goodies and baddies that come with that. But it does come to that question of an integrated solution, and it comes out of a conscious will to collaborate with organizations beyond your own. This lies at the heart of the commercial service. I am confronted with, in my business, and I see it in what we're faced with NADEC, and this is kind of a long-winded way of asking a question to our friends from the commercial service, or at least Earthwire, is coverage models. We talk about, oh, the Chinese are all over the place. Trevor and I were talking earlier about Africa. And you talk to a Medtronic, you certainly talk to my erstwhile friends at Cisco and HP and IBM, and they'll proudly tell you, oh, we do $1 billion in a year in Africa. Oh yeah, okay. Where are your markets? Well, it's actually 4 countries. Well, how many countries are in Africa? Well, there's like 54. So you mean you're not really touching the other 50 countries? Well, we have channel partner, they have all this kind of but guess what? Somebody touches those countries, and the capital of it is Beijing. So we can beat up on our friends in the U.S. government and the commercial service all we want, and I agree with the recommendations that Carmine is talking about in terms of projecting more resources into that. But how do we harmonize those coverage models? And so the American corporate model touches 4 markets, 5 markets out of 54. How do we change that? I have some ideas, but I wanted to turn that question to our friends in commercial service. How do we scale? How do we touch? Because you're not going to have a commercial service officer in 54 countries in Africa. You're lucky to have an economic attaché. But talk to us about the touch of the U.S. government and where that can touch the business folk coming for that whole of government, whole of business solution that we want to have.
Right, thanks, Scott. I mean, it's really interesting because, can you all hear me well? I was trying to position this centrally so we can just go. Right. Can you hear us? Okay, we're good. All right. So it's a great question because, if you go back to 2009 and you look at the data, the United States was the #1 trading partner with most countries where we want to be trading around 2009. From that point on through today, we've lost considerable ground to the Chinese. They have taken over. They are now the preferred partner, the #1 trading partner in many markets where we would have otherwise been there. And that decline in our ability to sustain those markets in the Western Hemisphere, in Southeast Asia, across Africa, and in Europe even in some cases, That decline is, it parallels a decline in our resources within the commercial service as we looked at this strategically. So while we were watching the Chinese, put more people into markets around the world to do more business and then ultimately come up with the Belt and Road proposition in 2013, we were also seeing a decline in our resources to be able to respond, which was unfortunate. We recognized that and have been trying to turn that ship around. And I think we have in some ways, and we can go into some of those details. But that's an important point to make because in order for us to move forward, we can always do more with what we have. I mean, we're always called on to do that. And we're in 95% of the world's GDP, and we're in 97%. We in the commercial service, our offices around the world, 97% of the markets where U.S. exporters are doing business. But the reality is we're spread thinly, and so we can't be as responsive as we should be for U.S. companies unless we find either better ways to do it, and we work in a more whole of government approach to bring in our colleagues from different parts of the U.S. government that are at our embassies and consulates, and here in Washington as well, and frankly around the U.S. And if we can do that, that's going to add muscle to it as well. As we're sitting here today, we were for the first time in almost 20 years able to get through a passback process, the president to put budget in for the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service specifically to increase our staffing worldwide. It wasn't as much as of course we'd like to see, but it was healthy. It's public information, about $26 million, which is going to allow us to take a step forward in 2023 when that budget process comes through. Fingers crossed there, early enough to be able to allow us to implement. That process itself still has to go through Congress, but our appropriators will have to decide and make decisions on that. But that indication from the administration that trade promotion and the work that we do is important. That branding America in all these places where we lost all this ground around the world over the past couple of decades, that recognition there is very, very important to us because it was our appropriators who were saying to us, well, you guys aren't asking for it. What do you need? That kind of thing. So we're in much better condition moving forward. That is part of that first step, by the way, is part of what we're looking at internally as a 5-year plan for continued growth to allow us to staff up and do things in a bigger way. But at the same time, it's important that we marshal the resources of the U.S. government on behalf of U.S. business. Now, Trevor, you and I were talking the other day, and we're talking about MOUs, all the MOUs you have to do in order to get the U.S. Department of Commerce engaged, to get the State Department engaged, to get the USDA engaged, to get the U.S. Exim Bank engaged, to get the EFC engaged. That's 5 separate places you have to go, 5 separate amount of times that your company has to spend money and resources just getting its own U.S. government in shape to pitch on its behalf. I think that's something we need to work on. A single point of entry, much like we have in the U.S. field. When you're looking for assistance from U.S. government for export promotion, foreign investment promotion, business assistance worldwide, you go to your U.S. field office, U.S. Foreign Commercial Service office, and you get that entry. We need to have that in a broad sense in the U.S. government as well. I had a chance to speak with some State Department colleagues this morning, trying to work on an initiative under something called the Championing American Business through Diplomacy Act, the capital legislation that came through in 2019, 2020, which I asked the U.S. government to do more on behalf of U.S. business. And it actually forces the State Department to carry posts around the world to take more of a stronger role in supporting U.S. companies. And what we were talking about this morning, I'm not letting any cats out of the bag here, is actually aligning all the things that all of these agencies do, including USDR and the Treasury Department and others who are engaged and have staff worldwide, to bring to bear truly a whole of government approach, which means it means aligning our assistance that we provide, that Commerce, that State provides, that USDR provides, that others provide, in a way that hasn't been done before. In a way that where you're not having to go in one door and figure out, am I talking to the right people and such. We will have a plan. So we have a plan, and I have to say it's a great meeting this morning. We're going to be looking at really aligning a piece that I think has been missing for all of you around the world, and that is a capacity building aspect for these markets where we're trying to do investment. There are markets we're trying to get into. There are new markets out there. There are hot markets that are going to be markets in the future where we need to add some resources and capacity to support you guys because there's incredible opportunities there. And we're opening Bangladesh as a post. You'll be interested to hear that in the months ahead, just a couple of months. And then to have a commercial service presence there is something that, because it's a hot market. I mean, it's really going for U.S. companies right now. And we're looking at those opportunities. But at the same time, we want to bring our econ colleagues in to help us build the capacity of the economic development capacity that we needed for us to bring companies to the market. So, state builds the capacity, we bring the companies there. USDI gets the trade agreements done so we can have a soft landing. We all work together on various aspects of commercial diplomacy to make sure your company gets what it needs. And I think this is, it's been out there, there's been opportunity to do this, but we have a unique opportunity now with the capital legislation to actually put it in policy so that everybody's clear, so that the U.S. citizens, at the end of the day, are clear on who approach and how to get things accomplished. And we will play, I think, a stronger role in the commercial service through our U.S. field offices as well, in ensuring that you understand where to go and how we get things done for you. We have something that you have been, and I'll stop here, you've been, as companies, able to work through, whether you've known it or not. It's called our U.S. teams, our team, our global team effort. And we have a number of industries that are covered in some regions of the world as well. This global team capacity that we have within the U.S. Commercial Service integrates. I think it's sort of the lifeblood of bringing our overseas field and our U.S. field together on behalf of companies in certain industries. It's something that's been brewing, and it was almost a grassroots approach some years ago. I think, and my colleagues in the room have heard me say this, I think it's the greatest thing that we have right now, because it really allows us to answer the question and get things done at the end of the day for you, and it allows us to take it from one market to the next without you even knowing, because we have the industry teams and the regional teams behind us. When we went into the pandemic, COVID-19, we were confronted with, what do we do in terms of exports? Can we export PPE and those kinds of things? We had a lot of policy discussions, 2019, 2020 in particular. We had, at the end of the day, to come up with actually a policy document from the White House to State Commerce with joint collaboration to allow us to actually approach markets with American exports of healthcare equipment and technologies. It was a hard policy to get in shape. But at the end of the day, it was the global teams that were the most relevant, in my mind, the most relevant support for U.S. business in that process. They were the ones who were helping the NSC and others understand what U.S. business needed in markets and what needed to be done globally for that. So those are, I guess that point would be that, the policy aspect in terms of the government policy, things we do to support U.S. business and policy are supported by all of my colleagues here in the room and the work that they do with you. We want to hear from you. One of the things we're going to be doing as a part of this capital legislation and this policy group we're setting underneath it is trying to link the decks. I haven't spoken to you about this yet. We're trying to link the decks to a committee, to a working group within this policy that will allow you to say, hey, look, in this region, these are the market access issues we have, and this is what we need U.S. State to be working on, and Commerce to be helping us with, and things like that. We want to pull in the capacity of the decks to have a better conversation with us about some of the hardcore stuff that we need to accomplish to set the table, to set the market, to create a market, to basically open these markets for you guys. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dale. There's several wonderful nuggets in your comments right there. The one that jumps out to me, particularly evocative, is capacity building. And this is an American strength. When we talk about export of technology, let's think about export of organizational technology and how does that occur. Now that's a human exercise. It gets deeply mysterious and psychological and sociological and all that kind of stuff. Back when I was doing my Cisco gig, I was in Riyadh, and I was trying to sell internet connectivity to King Khalid University, and I was briefed in advance that I was about to meet the son of a sheikh, and I was rather nervous about the formalities of it, and the gentleman came in. He wasn't that old. He was around 40 years old. And the characteristic beautiful long robes that are particular to Saudi Arabia. It was a stunning sight. And I'm practicing my proper form of greeting, and walks in and he goes, "I'm a Missouri Tiger. Where did you go to school? I hope it was Big 12. Oh my God. And I ran into that repeatedly throughout the world. So what does that tell you? It tells you a number of things, but when we get back to capacity building, it is that we need to draw in the world here. if we are feeding infrastructure, we need to train. And part of that training, and I would hope that we can be generous about that, is bringing these human beings here to have those experiences. Because once they go back home with those experiences, they are forever fond of not just the United States, but how we do business. So the capacity building element is vital. And guess what the Chinese don't do? In digital systems, they don't provide Chinese, there's no such thing as Chinese security. That's an abundant oxymoron. But they also do not train. They do not train in any aspect of the infrastructure. And this is where we have an opportunity. The combination of the creativity of small, medium enterprise infrastructure solutions, be it medical or digital, and it goes well beyond that, but the training of these human beings and bringing them to the United States. And I'm excited about the capacity building exercise. We just finished training the entire senior management of the Cybersecurity Authority of Burkina Faso at North Carolina State University back before the coup. But this was a meaningful exercise. And this is a strength, and this is something that I'd love to see more of that capacity building. And can you speak to that? And Carmine, let me throw that out to you as part of the recommendations that we made to the commercial service and these additional resources. Where does capacity building fit in, and where do you see it in the overall equation?
I think as a commercial officer overseas for many years, I always found it helpful whenever a U.S. business person came to visit it. There was never some internal capacity building. And we really depended on the private sector to tell us how to build capacity with companies. And I remember we used to do that a lot with Medtronic in the area of pharmaceuticals and medical devices. You're really working hand in hand with U.S. industry to communicate our views about policy, our views about technology, and really to line up folks to come to the United States and see those technology. Technology capacity is very, very important. But I want to go back to the point that I don't think there's enough coverage. I think you alluded to that around the world. And again, there's something we have to do to help our noble efforts inside, the innovation going on, like, for example, with the industry teams, incredible innovation. But there isn't enough. And I hear from folks around the country, I hear from international trade specialists around the country that their companies are not able to get all the support that they need, certainly in Africa. So there, more people would certainly help a lot. You can only go so far with what we have. So again, from the tactical, we need more support. This pushes back to the strategic. I think there needs to be USA HR practically in every industry in America. That's kind of private sector collaboration that the commercial service and the State Department can work with all over the country. That would help at all. And I also think that we can elaborate on this. I think the district export councils need to reach out and reestablish ties that they've had with other major associations around the United States before. People change, so things fall by the wayside. But I know that NADEC had a very strong relationship with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, with the National Association of Manufacturers, with I think with the Business Roundtable as well. But that could be expanded to industry associations as well. So capacity building, I would like to see it internal to our government as well as what we do to folks around the world.
Trevor, where do you come down on that question of either coverage, capacity building, extension of the touch, either from the Medtronic experience or the US HAHA experience?
Yeah, just put it in commonsensical terms. I mean, I just think that at the end of the day, I think about, you think about the top. We don't like industrial policy here in the United States. I get that. But we also have limited resources. So what does any company, what does any organization do? They have to look where they're competitive. They figure out how to prioritize their resources somehow. I know that the healthcare sector, there was a study done a few years ago, and the healthcare sector turned out very, very competitive. Not only because it is in itself very, very competitive, but so I just think that we have to be very smart about how we do that. We don't have to play industrial policy. And by the way, in partnerships, we don't have to exchange money in order to do those partnerships. I don't exchange a single cent with my U.S. government to do this. All we're doing is exchanging information. That is all we're doing on a non-exclusive basis. We're just simply giving the U.S. government something to shoot at. They can send information wherever they want. So I do think that the healthcare sector, I want to stand up for the healthcare sector. It should be, if that wasn't clear to folks before COVID-19, I certainly hope it's very clear to everyone now. How America actually shows up, how much people want. And I think it's provided a lot of skepticism for a lot of countries around the world. To a lot of countries around the world. Look, people always enter into marriages of necessity. We get that. We understand that. Some countries that we've been talking about already today are marriages of necessity. It's because America is not there at all, or did not show up. I think about, I'd like to think about, I was in Egypt about 3 years ago. My wife and I would travel around the world with our kids, even, not business. And I called up the ambassador from Egypt to what I did. And I said, no, we're going to be in Egypt. Let's go to Egypt. And he said, no, I heard about you as a Zaha, and I want you to be met properly when you get to the foreign ministry. And I got it, went into the foreign ministry, and there was 10 people waiting for me, the deputy minister of health, hygiene's and a shirt on clothes. I did not think that we were going to meet some important people. He said, no, it's so important for us. We want to build foreign ministry, we want to build a foreign affairs hospital. But you guys, we were talking about this 2 or 3 years ago. There was not a single American company that showed any interest in that. So we've got an Israeli bid, we've got a Korean bid, we've got all these other bids. They didn't even put an American card on the table. What is that? What is that? I just want to challenge my buddies, my own colleagues, really to say, there is no such thing as too early in those discussions. That is a fallacy. When people want to have solutions to their problems, they call the U.S. Embassy. And it could be the CDC rep at the end of the embassy. It could be the HHS rep. It could be the commercial service. It could be the econ person. So if you have exactly what you're saying, Dale, exactly that team approach, no matter where that person or that discussion enters that ecosystem, it's going to end up in the right place. But ultimately, that's going to be transferred back to the companies that can actually action that opportunity. There is no such thing as too early. China doesn't think there's anything such as too early. And so what's our problem?
Wow. No such thing as too early. But doesn't it come down to touch? We come from a very orderly, very large society. We can do most of our transactions now with a click of a button. Even 20 years ago, when you could call and exchange money for goods over the telephone and with perfect strangers. In most of the world and throughout human history, if you were going to exchange your shells for tubers out on the plain someplace where you had to at least face that person and touch that person or have a pheromonal exchange with that person in some way. And it's still that way in a lot of the world. So to that point about there's no such thing as too early is very, very important. So it does come to that question of how do we touch as Americans. And getting back to the question of touch and the extension of commercial service, one of the things, and I'm not sure if you all have actually availed yourself of this, but did you realize that all of the multilateral development banks have a dedicated commercial service officer? That's really a cool thing. And these are, you talk about bureaucracies and turgid organizations, they are there. But you have a commercial service officer today, I will help you. And if they're doing their job properly, they're going to give you timelines of when you can expect answers and a little bit of a roadmap through these organizations, so you can decide whether harnessing those resources makes sense for you. I wanted to ask to Dale and to some extent Carmine, one of the things that we found to be very, very helpful were the dedicated commercial service officers in other U.S. government organizations. And one jumps to mind is Millennium Challenge Corporation, which you had a very competent set of officers there. Now it's stopped. These organizations are not friendly to small, medium enterprises. The U.S. Commercial Service, to my mind, is the only U.S. government organization that is really friendly and to the small, medium enterprise. Can we talk about, when we talk about the extension of the commercial service, it has to do not just with our customers, but with our U.S. government partners. You do a great job with the multilateral partners. What do you see down that road?
Yeah, Scott, that's a great point. All the things we talk about here are always going to come circling back from the U.S. Commercial Service, circle back to our own capacity to be spread as thinly as we can, wherever we can, to support the company. We do have officers, and we did have a staff member on at MCC a couple of years back. We do have officers that sit on the World Bank, officers and other GS staff that sit with the World Bank and the other development banks as well. They're generally one person, or maybe two in some cases. And they also have other responsibilities. I can tell you that our person who is at the World Bank also oversees what is now known as the Partnership for Global Infrastructure, which is an initiative that's going to be announced very soon to put America behind infrastructure development around the world, which is great. But again, our companies are not going to put in, are not going to just gladly put in new infrastructure somewhere where they can't do business, where the market is not right, where the economics are not right, where the politics are not right. So there's a lot of capacity building that needs to go on there as well. Those points of contact, but those points of touch are very, very important. And what I think we can do is, and what we're trying to do through through the TPCC, but more recently through the process we call deal teams. You may have heard this term bandied about. It's kind of a funny little way of saying that we're helping ensure that U.S. companies, when they're presented or have an opportunity to deal, that they have the full force of the U.S. government to the extent that we can behind them to whether it's financially through various financial institutions or even some of the development banks. Or whether it's feasibility for TDA or whatever other commercial support or advocacy they might be, to get that playing field for that tender, that bid that they're putting in there, set and fair and transparent. We're trying to bring a stronger effort behind that. We've been doing it for years. I mean, deal teams have been out there. I think, in many respects, as my colleagues have heard me say, I think the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service in and of itself is America's deal team. We're out there trying to get business for you guys, trying to do some things. What we've done more recently is try to put in a mechanism for early warning on projects so that you know in advance that something's coming down the pipe. You can't be there. I hope it's, yeah.
But we need to feel more.
No, there's so much more we can do. And again, it comes back to that, our ability, our own capacity to wherever we're spread out, to have the resources to be able to do everything in a particular market for a particular post. I think the other thing on that, and one thing we're attempting to do as a U.S. government, but also as a Congress and ITA and the U.S. and FCS global market, is message what we do. Because we've got all the tools. We're out there. We've been doing a great job for you guys. Given the resources that we have, and in terms of our staff, we will. And it's been true for a number of years. I mean, we've been doing significant work. So the problem is nobody knows. So you don't know to turn to us. You go to the embassy, you get that CDC person first, and they flip it if they know who we are. They'll flip it to us, and we can work with you. We've got to do a better job, messaging our, what we do, why we do it. That's coming, but that also takes some work. Within the two final points within that PASBAC appropriation, we're looking at two ways. We're looking at it, not only to staff up in key markets worldwide that advance the administration's priorities, which basically are your priorities as companies anyway. We're listening to you and then turning them into to initiatives in the Asia Pacific, in the Western Hemisphere, particularly across Africa is where we'll be building. But a part of that budget, if you will, once it comes through from Congress, will be used specifically for branding of American business and through trade promotion, through physical trade shows, all these places where we need to be, where we haven't had a USA brand, where we've been hard to find. If you go to a trade show, it's hard to find the U.S. companies unless you know what you're looking for if you're a foreign participant. Where the governments have said, where are the U.S. companies? Why aren't you showing up? We're going to be branding ourselves in a big way so that it's very consistent worldwide. You know that America's there. That's important. You've got to show up. We've got to get back into our own backyard. We're in the Western Hemisphere. We've got to be in China's front yard in the Asia Pacific and say that America's here. We're not here just to compete. We're here to provide alternative. We're going to provide, as you probably heard Maurice Lotto say today, that alternative is really important because it does bring, as you said, this ecosystem of integrated solutions to bear. And that alternative is really there because they've had a chance. Countries have had a chance to look at China's solution. We've promised a lot of things that are finding it's not working out the way that they had thought, right? And they've gotten themselves into certain situations where they would have otherwise, and if you've been there to be supportive, they can turn to us. And we're going to turn that around. And to do that, we've got to have all this capacity that we're talking about, right? So I'd like to go back to Carmine's point because I thought it was really, really important. And it was subtly made, and I think that, but I think it needs to be boosted and more robust. We used to say, like Carmine in the day, and that is that the DECs, you guys need to take a leading role with us. If we're going to message that the Commerce Department is out there in front of U.S. business around the world and building the strength of the U.S. business solution, whether it be integrated or otherwise, we need the organizations back here in Washington. The foreign affairs community and the associations also need to understand that. And I think this is where the DEC's can really come in. I worry less about you guys asking for money for us, and I'm not going to suggest that you do. I mean, it's like, I'm not allowed to. But what I am interested in is that you're letting our not only our constituents, but the foreign affairs community and the interagency know that there's the importance of export promotion, the importance of U.S. business solutions worldwide, the importance that are all SMEs, it's underserved communities, which is a huge thing for us, which has been long overdue. We've got to get out there and fly the flag. So if you go back and, as Carmine said, work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and have that engagement, tell them what's important to you guys. That would be that will help us sell the message as well. And I think that's a partnership that we should pursue.
Excellent. Carmine, I know we're running short on time, and we wanted to allow for some questions. From your deep understanding of what we've looked at as the National District Export Council, where do you see what along the things we've touched on and beyond? What are you seeing in terms of our recommended? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think the National District Council as an organization is doing an amazing job. I really do, and I think the fact that they see that there's a lot of change going on, and that we have to change. So what I mean by that is that, look, in 2021, 2022, there's a lot of new programs that never existed before. I would argue they're a form of industrial policy. And what the framework paper does, that the NADEC has endorsed, is saying the commercial service has to be part of this administrative infrastructure that helps rebuild international competitiveness. So that's the main thing that I think is important to communicate to Congress. But you also have to tell them, you have to give them the concrete stories of what's working and not working. And I think the companies, the community, have that information. I think you have to tap into powerful stories, more than statistics. ITA reports, International Trade Administration reports statistics up to OMB and so on. I think powerful stories are really important that you give to both the authorizing committees They're the long-term planners that support the organization that comes from it, and the year-to-year appropriators who are funding things. And then again, like Aurora already said, partnerships. Revitalize the partnerships that we have. Bring more organizations like US, which they have, into the fold. More sectoral organizations, but help to foster more innovation like Trevor has started. I think those are the main things that I would push for.
Now, that paper is available to all DEC members, correct?
It is available. I understand, I see Sean there in the background. I think we're considering putting that in a place on the website where it could easily be searched for.
Matter of fact, I'll check my already been done.
Okay, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Because no one in that group pretended that that was the final story. It is meant to be an interim set of recommendations, that this is an ongoing, unfolding drama. And we talked about what the themes of that were today. We talked about collaboration, we talked about coverage, we talked about capacity building, we talked about timing. Speed to market is, you know, if you summarize the Chinese advantages in three buckets. One is financing, we can handle that if we decide to. But the other one is ubiquity. They're in every market. It's that question of coverage. But the other one is speed to market. You'll find that our Chinese competition gets terms and conditions in the hands of their customers. And sometimes we go to a place and, oh, the Chinese have done this, and the American has to go back and say, oh, well, I'm going to get a letter of interest from Exim Bank or a letter of interest from DFC. Well, by the time that is done, and it's a dubious product at best, it's done. So we have to be able to have speed to market and coverage in a superior way. But all of these things are within reach, and the good news about that is we do have an outstanding cooperation with the USFCS, and I invite the DEC members here to exercise that open invitation for them. We've heard from Dale today that there's going to be some new initiative around regional DEC, maybe a DEC cooperation around the region. He's being coy, but we'll get more information in the fullness of time. I am sure that the DEC will want to take up that invitation. There's a lot of invitations coming out of our friends at USFCS, and so I think that's all for our broadcast. Are there any questions that we can handle? I'm mindful it's late in the day and people have to go. Sean?
I have a question. I don't only do cybersecurity, I also teach cybersecurity at the university. And when you talked about the fact that when you went to Saudi Arabia, you had somebody who went, I guess, to the University of Missouri or whichever one. But the thing is, it reminded me of when I got my Master's of International Business. I met people from all over the world, including Saudi Arabia, etc. What is the commercial service doing to tap into all of these international students that are coming to the U.S.? These students are usually the children, or grandchildren, or nieces and nephews of very powerful people in their country. And I don't know if every country in the world is represented at some university, but I would be surprised if it's not. I'm an electrical engineer by degree, and I challenge you to go to any engineering school at any university and not meet some international students. So, what is the commercial student?
All right. So I represent Study Wisconsin, so we're Study State Consortium. There's a couple of us here, but Commercial Service recently asked the DECs to invite the Study State Consortium representatives to join the DEC. So I would say that's one step in the direction, and I think we're sort of tasked with figuring out how can we work more closely and collaborate with the business communities to further those, right? Because we are losing out on international students to Canada, Australia, right, and other markets. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for the business community to work with international student recruiters to try and make sure we can maintain, right, the U.S. at that level for international students and then later the business. So I I think there's a start.
There's one question, one answer, and the answers are not exhaustive. Gentlemen, do you have any comments on
Yeah,
that?
no, just to say that, we recognize the importance of the international students to this economy and to that part, to the broad partnerships in the future. Because we know many of them will go back and become important people in their own economic zones of their countries. I will say that we have one of the biggest services exports that we track in the export is education services, and that piece in and of itself is exactly what we're talking about. It's holding events that will attract students overseas to come and learn about going to school in the U.S., whether it be undergraduate or graduate students. So we do a lot of that. I think the piece that's missing is how do we find those folks that are like in the high end, if you will, that go ahead.
Well, they're already here.
They're already here.
They're already here,
Yeah.
so what
Yeah.
are we doing to find?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna take that back. We've got maybe some of my colleagues here are on the service, on the education team. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, this is Brian from Nebraska. And I'm very honored to be here listening to the business leader like Trevor and the government official like there, Carmine. And so I was shocked to hear that it's a big multinational business CEO like Trevor. And it sounds to me that he's not getting enough support from government. And we are all small. Most of us here are smaller, very tiny business, unlike theirs, unlike Trevor's. So do you think that you're not getting enough support from government? So what do the small business would think? Should the government prioritize support for big business and small business exporters?
No, so first of all, I thank you for your question. But I think to say that my message was I'm not getting support from the U.S. government is incorrect. We're getting a lot of support from the government. A lot of support. As Medtronic, I worked with Daloisio in India. I was online dealing with things. I'm nuts. These guys are on the front lines. They're doing a hell of a lot. They are incredibly stretched. Incredibly stretched. With Scott, I was responsible for the expansion of all of our services in the early 90s to the former Soviet Union, all these different countries that all of a sudden woke up. And Trump was involved in that effort right away. What I would just simply say is that they're so stretched. We just need the government to communicate with itself. And that's exactly what Dale said. So we just need to, and it's happening, we just needed more of it. We need to give them also a reason to break down some of those traditional barriers, Like companies, we're trying to break down their, I've got 20 organizations, 100,000 people in our company. We just went from a structure of 4 big business groups to 20. That doesn't make my job any easier. This is not simplicity. This is not, So I 100%. Although it was difficult because, like Leo said, we had to negotiate separate MOUs with 4 U.S. government agencies. I just thought that was just normal, and I took my time. But the wonderful thing is that they do work a lot, very, very closely with each other. I just think we need to have examples. We need more and more of that in sectors that really are meaningful for America. Not only from an export perspective, but from a goodwill perspective. And let's think about that for a second here, because when America, I come back to healthcare, I'm sorry, that's my job, right? At the end of the day, if we can deliver healthcare solutions to people all over the world, it's a massive social impact that America has. Forget about the jobs in America just for a second. I'm not saying that isn't incredibly important, but think about the credibility of this. That an ambassador can also say we actually care fundamentally about that country. There are not a lot of sectors where you can basically say, I'm exporting massive amounts of things, and I'm saving the lives of your people, and I'm bringing them back from infirmity back to full life. That's what we're about. U.S. government hugely supported, need more.
Not enough passion there. Once again, the cruel hand of time is robbing us of further discussion.